Give it a shot.
Hi, I'm Emily. I live in Chongqing and I'm always damp. It's very pleasant. I'm a sucker for a hot tub, and a natural hot tub I'm naturally a sucker for. Chongqing is a damp place. Super humid in the summer. In the winter, it just becomes damp. And damp is such a weenus word. Like, think of, I shook his hand and it was damp. Or I sat in something and now my butt is damp. But it also is like all those early 19th century literary heroines died of the damp. I feel a bit silly. When I started researching for this video, I was like, does China even have fountains? Is it worth looking for a fountain in Chongqing? We've come to 𝗖𝗵cie Park because we were assured that there were some fantastic water features to see. But it's under construction currently, which you might notice is a theme, that either places we go are under construction or we didn't end up at the place we thought we were going. So we came to the Chongqing Hot Springs Museum today, which is just across the street from the 𝗖𝗵cie Hot Springs. Although we're not going in today, it's just a scoping mission to see what the area is all about. So the health benefits of mineral springs, everybody knows about it. As this museum states, there's a European tradition, a Chinese tradition, and a Japanese tradition of soaking in hot, natural, mineralized water for your health. And it is like, my experience of it is a lot of, everyone's like, why is she talking to herself? Water distribution in China has always been a huge problem, but this area of the country is super wet. So we're like the fertile breadbasket of the country. It is steamy. Health is a very personal thing. And I'll tell you, I like to think I'm a science-believing person, which is not a given in this current environment. I believe in evidence-based medicine, but when it comes to like, I actually feel bad, I'm not necessarily making the most rational choices. It made sense once I thought about it, but it actually surprised me to find out that fountains, the original purpose of fountains was, of course, drinking water. Hot springs have a long tradition in many parts of the world as being like a health thing. And here, China does have its own history. Oh yeah, 我有一个对我不是自己说话 I know there are, from a Western perspective, issues with Chinese medicine, in that some very traditional ingredients might be considered toxic. So that's, issue is a gentle way of putting that. But I'd also know that Western thought has a habit of considering its own traditions the truth, and other traditions, at best, delightful folkways, and at worst, idiocy. And I think that's a mistake. For something that we drink without mercy, water can be like pretty destructive, which is why Bruce Lee said his famous quote, "Be like water," which is something I think about a lot as an aspiring pacifist with a temper. The first fountains in the world were probably in the Mesopotamian region where modern-day Iraq is, between 2,000 and 3,000 BC. But pretty much every civilization figured out some way to get water to their citizens, especially once civilization started making cities. 对，
你在哪儿的仓位啊？仓位学呢？
我是美国人，但是住在重庆。
住在重庆，在哪个单位工作啊
This is all according to the article in Water Journal of 2015, a short global history of fountains. We took a family trip to England many years ago, and we stopped in Bath, which is so named because there's baths there. In the same article, they talked about China, which had its first well/fountain structure maybe like 2,000 years ago. China's water distribution depended mostly on wells, but in areas where natural springs were, they also built fountains. But wells, same as fountains, as soon as you had these functional vessels, people started to beautify them with like stone sculpture on the top. Because when you have a thing, why not make it beautiful? Damp in Chinese medicine is one of the 6 pernicious influences on the body, and you can balance it out with dryness. And of course, there are damp and dry foods that you can eat. When I'm sick, my body craves microwave Stouffer's macaroni and cheese, which is not a health food, but it is like, it's a comforting thing that when I want comfort, I desire it. And when we were first married, and I had a cold, I asked Peter to go out and get some for me, and he's like, "What? That's terrible for you." And he's right. I mean, feed a fever, starve a cold, but there's no illness you're supposed to cover in heaps of liquefied, fake processed dairy. Pain is something we don't fully understand. I mean, I don't understand it at all, but like medical science doesn't really know. They know it's an interplay between something physical that's happened to you, but also something mental that's going on. And your perception of pain can be changed by your mood, or like what happened to you, or what associations you make with the injury. The Islamic world had some spectacular fountains where the function started to be overshadowed by what the engineering and artistry could do, and so they would plan these spectacular gardens with fantastic water features at the center. And then you'd see that came through Europe as well, and you can still, when you go to European cities today, see these marvelous fountains. That's often part of your checklist of traveling. Like if you go to the Trevi Fountain in Rome, the legend is if you throw a coin in, then you will come back to Rome, which, cool.
我是老师在重庆医科大学，四川外语学院啊，川外，四川外语学院。你是我那边四川外语学院对吗？
重庆医科大学. It's something I'm most familiar with through reading books about British people going to the springs, going to the shore to take in the waters. Because in the modern day, it's more for fun, although I like thinking about the medical aspects of it as well. I think medical science is really interesting for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, it directly affects the quality of our life. And 2, we accept it as a lot more solid than it really is. We're always learning new stuff about the body and about medicine and about treatment, which is really cool. And when I was like 12, I put my hand through the bathroom wall, not because I'm super strong, but because the damp had destroyed it from the inside. The fountains of Versailles were so spectacular that they outstripped the actual amount of water that they had, so the engineers would have to turn the fountains on and off as Louis XVI walked by. They'd turn them on and then they'd turn them off because there just wasn't enough water. Which kind of reminds me of here in China, where I see fountains a lot, is in fancy housing complexes, and they get turned on when they're trying to sell the apartments. But then they don't keep them on because it's expensive and it wastes a lot of water. So we've lived in a lot of places that have a fountain capability, but do not actually have a functional fountain. Even though medicine is a science, it's an evolving science, and everyone's experience of it is personal. I don't do lab tests on anything I bring home from the drugstore. I just take it. I do have to say, from soaking my hands and feet earlier, the skin at least feels like really nice. feel like I have good circulation, which is not how I usually feel.
重庆医科大学。
对。
医科大学里，住在大学城还是住在这边啊？
住在大学城。
大学住过一点。
就是今天我们要看看。I think I said something historically inaccurate. Surprise, surprise. So according to my notes, based on this article in Water Journal, the well dates back 6,000 years in China. So that's a long time. But if there are humans, they need water. So that's not surprising. And wells with stone structures for beautification at the top date back to the Song dynasty about 3,000 years ago. So, long time. Like everyone who has to point out, like, you don't want to go back and live in the past. You would have died from a paper cut. Or like, my grandparents were alive when polio was still a problem. 你们是福建吗？
福建的。他是说我们听的。他在你在医科大学教那个外语吗？英语吗？
对，教英语。对。And we went to a place, I kind of remember having lunch there, but the specialty was that you could take the waters of bath. Although when we ordered everyone one glass, their own glass, the waiter was like, I suggest one to share. You're not going to want to drink a whole glass of this stuff. And it was like, in Bath, it was pretty sulfurous. So it didn't actually taste that good. But did we feel healthy? I don't know. We felt special. We felt Jane Austen-y is how we felt. Because it does not seem to be a part of the tourism architecture the same way as in Europe. If you go to a city, every city has a spectacular fountain for you to go see. Or even in like New York City, Central Park has some gorgeous fountains.
你们医科大学在大皮也有一块。
对。
你到中国来了多少年了
？10年。
哦，也很长了，很长了都是。哎。
And as a amusing aside, I was looking up what damp foods were because I had a hunch that was a thing. And I found several wellness websites of like wellness centers in America. And they use suspiciously similar language because no one on the internet knows it's not okay to just cut and paste other people's words. But that's not damp, that's just plagiarism. When I think about how do you have a conflict with someone who is willing to be aggressive, I think the key is somewhere in that be like water. But according to these websites, they said damp food is usually self-evident, like cheese or fried chicken. And what they mean is the grease. And after the fact, if you say that, okay, I get it, that's what damp food is. Although why isn't soup a damp food? And soup is not a damp food. Of course they have fountains here, but the relationship seems to be different, and I think there's two reasons for that. And this is purely a guess, so if you do know better, I'd love to hear it. So this is my speculation. Number one, growing up in the West, my education was firmly seated in Western culture and like studying art history. The art history I've studied and am familiar with is all the Western canon. And so I know how to appreciate that style of sculpture. And the Renaissance of Europe is like the basis of what I think art is. Whereas in the East, artistic aesthetics are very different, which of course makes them no less important. But it is just like when I look at, like, we lived in Lijiang, and in the old town they did have like little structures, I think, on the sites of where ancient wells had been, but it doesn't have the same aesthetic pull of like Venus in her shell. So it, to me, is easier to overlook. And I think the deceptive simplicity that's prized by a lot of Eastern art, our eyes kind of slide right past. 你们经常来这儿吗？
对，我也很少有来。你到这儿来挺远的啊，你坐车来的？
这是第一次我来的。
你坐车过来的啊？你怎么知道这个地方呢？
在网上看。
挺好的嘛，挺好的，挺好的。
And I did for a while see a doctor in Luzhou who I think would give me a combination of Chinese medicine and Western medicine. And I'm fairly healthy these days. I didn't die anyway. It would usually be for head colds, which like you can't really do anything about. You're going to be sick till you're not sick anymore. But I don't know. I think it's valuable to keep an open mind. My second theory is more speculative, that given China's history, from what I understand, empires had trouble establishing dynasties. Like maybe an empire would last 1 or 2 generations, and they had very violent, destructive ends. And then on top of that, you have the colonization. For example, like the Anglo-Franco forces that looted the Summer Palace in Beijing. And in fact, some of the statues from the Zodiac Fountain in the Summer Palace are still being found, according to Antiques and the Arts, a antique blog.
挺好的，重庆好玩的地方挺多的。
啊，我也这么想。
哎，你到磁器口去没有？啊，磁器口啊，很多年以前我看，但是新的磁器口还没看。去嘛，现在比以前修得更漂亮了。啊 ，OK， 很好，可以去。
我要去。
来，你在美国哪一个地方啊？
纽约。
哦，纽约，我也去过。
啊。And I like to think of that scene from Star Trek 6 when they go back in time and Bones is at the hospital and they're like performing a routine surgery of what would have been contemporary at the time. Like how barbaric, they cut them open. It all perceives how much pain you feel you're in. I mean, there are some philosophers that say pain is weakness leaving the body, but I'm not sure I agree with them. So my very speculative theory is we don't have Trevi fountains and we don't have, I can't think of the name of another famous fountain, even though I know there are more than that, because they all got destroyed or looted in the violence that went on. But that, again, that is totally my guess.
他也是老师。
啊，
是你们同行。
很好。
我已经退休了多年了。
你叫什么？
我叫物理。
Ah, okay. No society sits around thinking, objectively, we are barbaric. But, you know, one day, if there's a future for the human race, which is not a guarantee, we're going to look back at the things that we do now and be like, oh my God, how could they not have known? But it's because medical technology is always evolving, and I think that's fascinating. In the modern age, something that's become popular around the world, we're not spending millions on fantastic new Michelangelo sculptures or the equivalent thereof, but with the musical fountain and light show, it like from the Bellagio to right here behind me, is like a thing that people go see.
这个重庆跟你们纽约又不同。
哦，我们刚来重庆8月份我们刚来，以前我们住在泸州，四川
泸州
啊，对的。Damp makes whatever temperature is worse. Like there's a reason why people say with relief, oh, but it's dry heat. And like cold is bad enough, but cold and damp is like, oh, that pitiful little puppy is what I picture. Puppies are cold and damp. It's just unpleasant. No one likes to be damp. I get it, I guess, like man's control over water is something to celebrate. Although it, like, with the capabilities we have, we can send probes to Mars. It doesn't seem as special to me to have, even if it's set to music, but whatever. If you think it's fun, that's cool. That's cool for you. But I did come across on the Indian intellectual property law blog that, 𝗖𝗵cie IP, that there was a court case in China that ruled that these musical fountain shows are copyrightable works of art. So I thought that was really interesting.
你在泸州那个就是泸州医学院。
在泸州，我在一个幼儿园教。
我是泸州人。
对。
我真的我是泸州人。
你是泸州人？
哎，老家是泸州的。老家是泸州的。哪一个幼儿园的在哪条？
我每一个地方我去，我认识泸州人。She's also from Luzhou. I guess what's supposed to be impressive about them is their mimicry of natural geysers, like that power of water being shot into the sky. But like when the Earth does it, I don't know, it's a lot more impressive than like I made a machine that goes. 我们走，很高兴认识你们。走，
来玩吧。
到重庆玩。谢谢。